And this is going back to, they might be very deep in demand, for example. And you might say, well, doesn't everybody need demand today? Well, yes. But you know what? Again, the demand in the environment they came from maybe have been created very, very different than what your market requires. So they come in with their playbook and you're scratching your head a year later going, we're doing all this great stuff, but the revenue needle isn't moving. What's going on? And it's a mismatch. And this can really happen with senior leaders.
Hi, welcome back to SaaS Half Full, the only show serving B2B SaaS marketers. I'm Lindsay Groper, president of Blast Media, and I will be both your host and bartender today. I had a conversation with Mark Donnigan, who is a virtual CMO and go-to-market consultant, working a lot with B2B SaaS companies. And today we are talking about making your first marketing hire. So whether you are a CEO at a startup looking to make that very first hire, or you are a solo marketer at a startup or scale up looking to make your first marketing team hire, what should you look for and what should you look out for? We talk about the dangers of getting infatuated and falling in love with big titles and or looking for people coming from big brands looking to join your startup. So join me as I have a conversation with Mark to talk about all things new marketing hires. Hey, Mark, welcome to SaaS Half Full.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you, Lindsay. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I'm hoping this is your first conversation of the day. It is 8 a.m.
It is.
Where you are. Thank you. Appreciate you turning your brain on at this hour. As our listeners know, we drink on this show, but I really couldn't ask you to have anything but coffee or water at 8 a.m.
I have my coffee, so here we go.
There you go. Well, our listeners know that I'm a complete degenerate, so I'm cracking a White Claw at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday.
There you go. There you go. Cheers. That's why we run our own companies, right?
Absolutely. I've only not had a drink on my show one time, and it was when I had COVID, and I just physically couldn't bring myself to do it. Couldn't taste it. So then what's the point? But other than that, no matter the hour, no matter the day, here I am. Well, Mark, I am excited to have you on the show. Today, we're going to talk about building marketing teams for earlier stage companies, startups to scale ups. You have a lot of experience working with B2B SaaS. You have some interesting points of views on building teams and when the right time is, how big, how little, and I'm excited to get into that. But before we do, give our listeners an understanding of who you are, what you do. You're a virtual CMO as well as a go-to-market consultant, but my assumption is that's not how you started your career. Catch us up to speed on how you got here and then what you offer for your clients today.
Yeah, that's right. So, hey, like everybody, I had a master plan and I executed it flawlessly. And that's exactly why I am where I am today. That's a joke. Yeah, super quick. 12 years old, I discovered my school's Apple II computer. And so I'm dating myself right there, Apple II. Taught myself BASIC and went, wow, this is amazing. I can make a computer sing and dance. And yeah, I wasn't doing anything that cool, but really that was a foregone conclusion that I was going to be, well, back in those days, a programmer. So went into a computer science program. The end of the second year of that program, I realized I have a problem because I was spending more time playing with my band, rehearsing, thinking about music, wanting to be a rock star than I was studying. So dropped out, worked for a couple of years, went to music school, of course, because, hey, I want to be a rock star. And then I went, you can't really make a lot of money. And like very, 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 very few people actually become rock stars. Well, that got me into the sales track. And, as my sales career progressed, I began to take on more marketing and in the early days, I talk about it quite frequently when I do interviews. And I thought, wow, it's interesting. Where did marketing sort of merge for me? Because I was a pure seller. I was hardcore. If you look at the books behind me, half of them, at least 40% of them are pure sales books, going all the way back to Zig Ziglar, all the greats, all the spin selling books, all of that. And really what it was out of need, right? I was in environments where either there wasn't marketing or marketing was not being very well executed. So I guess my right brain came out for the creative side and started taking that on. As I took that on, I realized the amplification power of marketing. I've heard it described, sales is like the army. It's the boots on the ground. And we often say that, we've got boots on the street, i.e. sales reps, account managers, et cetera. And marketing's like the Air Force. And when they work together, it's pretty potent. And not that I like to use war analogies, but it's a good one that holds up. Today, I think of myself as a revenue-driven marketer. If you think about first principles, I step back and I say, how is this tactic, this strategy? We're debating the copy for the email newsletter. We're analyzing 3 images that we want to use in this LinkedIn post or whatever it is, however small or however big. And I find myself always coming back to what is going to connect the buyer or the audience or the ICP to making the decision that we want them to. And ultimately, that is revenue. So I'm not one of those marketers that tends to orient towards, hey, it's going to be good for our brand. You will literally never hear those words come out of my mouth. Brand's very important, by the way, extremely important. But everything comes back to how is this going to drive revenue? And so that's my story. And it also explains my points of view and how I function.
Yeah. And the CMOs that I know who grew up in a sales role are incredible CMOs and have that alignment with the sales team because they've been the boots on the ground, right? Do you still scratch the itch to be a rock star? You still playing music?
I have a piano here in my front room, and I have a little small home recording studio that over the years has shrunk. At one time, it took up a 3-car garage. that obviously was finished out, but then it got smaller and smaller. So long story short, no, I'm not playing really that much at all, but there's still instruments around.
It's a good skill to have for sure. All right, well, let's get into it, Mark. Speaking specifically of the B2B SaaS market, I mean, the last 18 months, woof, it has presented some challenges for marketing leaders. Literally, the role of the CMO has been trash. It's been terrible. My heart goes out to all of the full-time CMOs and those that have made the transition to fractional or virtual. What have you seen, if you could sort of sum up, what have you seen from a marketing standpoint that this shift has yielded both from a positive side and extremely challenging side?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the positive. The positive is this insanity, and I use that word very intently. This insanity that marketing's job is to spend $5 to get $1 or $2 of revenue is done. It's done, and it's not coming back. And that is awesome because it was stupidity. And even those who were in the middle of executing those strategies knew it fundamentally. But look, you're being paid well for how many more MQLs can you land? And we just raised another $75 million. So what do you need? You need another $8 million for your Google Ads budget? Whatever, fill in the blank, your primary acquisition channel. Those days are gone. Now, the good part of that is now we're all being forced to get back to the fundamentals of business. Fundamentals of business. Why should somebody even give us the time and attention to listen to what we can do for them? Much less pull out their PO book, pull out their credit card, and actually buy the product. And so I believe that that's forcing much healthier and certainly better behaviors. Now, the negative side of that is that I think there were a lot of playbooks that were push button playbooks. I buy these set of MarTech tools. I connect them all together. I register my credit card and I push a button and it spends money. And out the other side comes MQLs. And I put more dollars in, I get more MQLs. Now, I am not for a minute inferring that that was creating laziness, or there were some ingenious strategies and approaches into how to optimize that system. But let's face it, that's not marketing. That's not marketing. When you're basically, your job is to buy MarTech tools, optimize them, set them up, configure them, put money in, and then analyze charts and graphs, and then report on your QBRs. It generally is not, it's very transactional. So again, the marketers who have transitioned and have gotten back to the fundamentals, by the way, which were probably the fundamentals that we all learned and studied in the early days of our careers. The ones that have gone back to it are now like, wow, I'm back into the craft. I'm actually back into doing the work. What I am observing is those who are struggling and find themselves in short stint, are still falling back on that playbook, and it's not feasible to be executed, today.
Yeah, there a lot of that predictability in marketing has been erased.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This whole predictable revenue model, and I'm a bit of a contrarian. And look, I've got Mark Roberge's book behind me, and there are elements of the framework which absolutely still hold up. So it's not that predictable revenue models are stupid or shouldn't be pursued. It's just that the way that I think a lot of people thought of them and executed them, and also, frankly, the way buyers behave. This is another major, major observation that I'm still amazed at how many marketers and marketing leaders don't know that the buyer's journey has changed a lot from even just 7 years ago, but certainly 10 years ago. It's changed a lot. The buyer is now 100% in control. The buyer can get all the information they need. And, I like to say they don't need us. They don't, which is a little bit sad. It was great when they did need us, because guess what? Then we controlled the gate. We had access, but no more.
So that being said, marketers are still needed. I am encouraged by, fingers crossed, what the back half of 2024 is going to bring. And I, feel like the tech economy is coming back to a degree, and they're good. And if we're thinking about a startup or scale up company, there are times in the business where there is a clear need to amp up marketing. And whether that is spend or a new hire, what we're talking about and what I want to focus on is if you are the solo marketer, you're the marketing lead at a startup company, you have the resources that you need, but you don't have the capacity. So you've got to hire somebody. What are those triggers? Like, when do you know that it's time to make a significant marketing hire?
There's a little bit of you have to pick your path. So let me explain this. So one path is that you hire a generalist. So they're not deep in any one thing, but they are knowledgeable enough to be able to execute across the stack, if we think of it that way. Now, to be specific about what I mean there is, usually for most B2B, you're going to do at least one event a year. Now, it might be not much more than a 6-foot table and a stand-up sign. But you know what? Even that, you need to think, well, how are we going to promote this online? And hey, maybe we should print a nice tablecloth. And oh, what are we going to have? There's all of those sorts of logistics even that someone has to know. So you need someone who could do that, or at least figure it out. There's the digital channels there, so anyway, you can go around. So what you do is you start with somebody who's probably 5 to 7 years, meaning that they've done the job. They're not maybe 15 years in, because maybe that person wants to more lead or build a team, but they're 5, 7 years in. They've been a part of a slightly larger team, and they're super excited about coming in and maybe now being able to make some decisions, whereas before they were just executing what they were told to execute. So that's one path. Okay. Now I'm purposefully delaying saying like, oh, which do I recommend? The other path looks quite a bit different. So the other path is where you find someone who is, and I often use the word a conductor. And I really do like the orchestral analogy, because whether or not you're into that style of music, I think most people at some point in their life have had a chance to hear a symphony or at least see something on TV. And you think about what's happening in there. You've got 60 or 70 musicians on stage. Depending on who you're listening to, they could be literally the best in the world on their particular instrument. If you ask the question, well, why is there a conductor up there? The music's in front of them. Sometimes they have the music memorized. These are faint, right? Why is there a conductor? Well, there's a conductor because even though they are the best in the world at their respective instruments, the conductor is doing what, we see them do with their baton, right? They're bringing out the brass, they're slowing the tempo, they're controlling. That's how you take it from a, like, wow, that's amazing music to like jaw dropping or tear shedding, where it's just you're just listening going, this is just the most amazing thing I've heard. And that is the role of a CMO or virtual CMO or a conductor of marketing. Because very often what happens with the generalist path, and again, I'm delaying saying which is the right, because there's some further questions to say, hey, what approach is the right one? But the challenge you would have with more the generalist approach is that they may do all the activities of marketing, but you may not get that sweet music coming out. And so, you could say, yeah, I mean, our website is basically okay. We're showing up on LinkedIn. Hey, our search traffic is slightly trending up. We're not crushing it, but guess what? We do rank for a couple of keywords. Oh, our last trade show, the booth was actually okay. In other words, everything's okay. It's getting covered, but it's not amazing. Okay. Now, if you go down this other path where you find this conductor, this virtual CMO, somebody that creates an interesting challenge, though, because that person almost always is not going to do the work. Very, very, very rarely. Occasionally, you find some unicorn who is capable of doing this strategy and conducting the music and doing the work. Generally, what they're going to do is one of two things. They're going to have access to freelancers or consultants that maybe they've worked with before. Maybe they're further down in their career and they've got a team of folks. They're like, you know what? I know a designer. We don't need to hire someone full-time yet. I know a writer. I know someone who knows the digital channels. And they bring those people in. And again, they put the band together based on the music they need to make. Going with this music metaphor. So they do that. And this approach is always more effective, but depending on the positioning of the company, sometimes the generalist path is the quickest way to get started. And it is I would say, the easiest way to start getting your marketing reps in. Meaning repetition, starting to get marketing motions, because the other path is definitely going to have a period of planning, a period of strategy. They may or may not have a team that's on call, meaning ready to go. So they may have to go out and recruit. There's always discussion with a company. Well, what if we hired somebody? So there also can be some further investment on that side. So those are the two paths that you go down. But let me make one important observation. One of the mistakes that a lot of founders, especially if someone hasn't really built a marketing org before, one of the mistakes they make is the assumption. And the assumption is, if I go get somebody who's a director from HubSpot, they're going to come into my company and crush it.
Yeah. I mean, the good news for marketers right now is that there's been a shit ton of tech companies that have laid off their marketing departments. So the talent pool is ripe. And yeah, so I want those people, right?
Yeah, but here's the challenge though. And again, I'm not suggesting, a HubSpot marketer isn't good. That's not my point. My point is that where the mistake is that founder didn't understand the incredible support system, the resources available, the fact that director may have been largely overseeing the demand program. Maybe they were overseeing primarily comms, and their focus was really PR and media outreach. Maybe they were overseeing field marketing largely. And if a founder doesn't understand that, they could end up hiring somebody, and again, not picking on comms people or PR people. So they could end up hiring somebody who comes from a PR bent. Well, that person probably will step in and on day 2, put in place something that it would have taken that startup a year to build, right? Because they've got that muscle. But the problem is that, if you're B2B SaaS and you need revenue now and your board is beating you up for why your ARR isn't growing as you projected, guess what? Media placements, at least for most of us, is not going to ring that bell. It's not going to make it happen. So
we have these conversations too. We're a PR agency for B2B SaaS companies. And sometimes I'll be talking to a prospect and they'll say, well, we really like this other agency because they do PR for the, aspirational category leaders, like Slack. And I'm like, well, sure. But do you know how easy it is to do PR for Slack? We have 5 top media, you sneeze and they all say, oh my gosh, look at that sneeze. When people have never heard of you, it requires a different level of not only hustle, but know-how and sort of how to break through the noise. So I completely hear you on that. The other thing that is happening right now is because of the attrition of marketing leaders within these big orgs is there are folks with big titles that are maybe willing to roll up their sleeves and take a different role at a startup. What are some of the dangers of going after that title? Like VP is willing to come be VP for us. Where does that potentially go wrong?
Yeah, that's another major pitfall or trap, really. And look, you have to have individual conversations to see how sincere someone is when they say, oh, yeah, I know I was a VP and had 35 people working for me, but I'm happy to be your director of marketing and have 3. You really need to get and really suss out, are they really sincere in that? Some are very humble and very much like, hey, I get it, the market, and I want to stay in this town, whatever, and this is the opportunity. But I would say that often this is a stepping stone, right? The pitfall is a couple things. First of all, again, just going back to, they had a tremendous amount of resource at their disposal, which they're not going to have. The fact of the matter is they were able to buy maybe almost any tool they wanted. They could, like, hey, let's do a test. Let's put $15,000 behind this LinkedIn campaign. And you're thinking, I've got $25,000 for the entire year for LinkedIn, like, can you do it for 500? And they're looking back like, well, I could do it for 5,000. And so you get into this situation where there's just a real mismatch of what their former experience and how they worked. The other thing is that, just to be really frank, they generally can be very T-shaped. And I find a lot of founders don't know how to assess. And this is going back to, they might be very deep in demand, for example. And you might say, well, doesn't everybody need demand today? Well, yes. But you know what? Again, the demand in the environment they came from maybe have been created very, very different than what your market requires. So they come in with their playbook and you're scratching your head a year later going, we're doing all this great stuff, but the revenue needle isn't moving. What's going on? And it's a mismatch. And this can really happen with senior leaders. It takes some self-awareness or just some professional awarenesses on both sides. I really do believe that the leader also, unless they want to be a part of that churning CMO chair, which I don't think anybody does, that they also need to be very, very aware and cognizant and even have that discussion right up front. Like, hey, look, you know my background, the resources I had, the size of my team. I am very well aware that's not what I have here, but we're going to have to work together on this because there is a part of my strategies and my playbook that are going to come out of that. So we need to be flexible with each other. There may be times where I'm going to push you and I'm going to say, we really do need to spend more budget over here. Trust me in that. At the same time, if you see me going too far, pull me back. And I've been in situations where I've actually done that myself. And when you have trust between the senior executive, between the CEO, it's actually amazing because you can be each other's sort of rails in a way. That's one approach. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you're bullish on the back half of the year as I am on the tech economy. I'm feeling it. I can feel the tides shifting just a little. We've been through this before. Know it's going to bounce back, but I do. I'm feeling some good vibes, so that's good. Well, I know that you are joining me for a coffee this morning, but I do ask all of our guests to end with sharing their favorite toast to send us off. Do you have a favorite or signature toast?
I don't. I don't. So it's interesting you say that. About 50% of the time, sign my emails, cheers, almost 50% of the time, or to success. I love that. And in person, I, especially like at a networking event or business event, I very often will say something like, to success or something like that, So
okay, well, raise your coffee mug, and I'm going to raise my White Claw. Yeah, and we're going to say to success.
To success, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time this morning, Mark.
Hey, thank you, Lindsay. It was great talking with you.
Thanks again to Mark for joining me on SaaS Half Full. I am working my way through this White Claw at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Really enjoyed the conversation. I hope that you did too. Until next time, bottoms up.